Good morning. It's me again, Melik Gatchian, and today our lecture will be again regarding strategy sessions, strategy lessons. And today we will still discuss about how important to understand position with good and bad bishops. And today's game, I chose, it was a game from 1992 between Ukrainian Grandmaster Vasily Ivanchuk and Indian Grandmaster current world champion Vishwanath Anand. And the game, I believe it's very interesting because it has many interesting concepts inside. So in this position, black went here, bishop c4. And I would like you guys to explain how black came to idea to play that, let's say, not ordinary move. Why I believe that move is not ordinary, because black has a holes on d5 and f5, and seems like they're supposed to keep the bishop e6 alive, because we all know if you do have this pawn structure, the primary defender is your bishop, since he's the guy who will defend all these weak squares. And sounds like if I play bishop c4, I will lose my only defender, my primary defender, and sounds like, you know what, how heck I'm going to defend my light squares. But if you look at the different angle, you will see some other stuff. So we have an active rook on h8, which is very aggressive by doing pressure on h8 file, by h file. And most important part, if you do play slow, let's say, I don't know, let's say play king d7, for instance, right? Then white will play simply h3. They will connect the pawns, right? In case if they feel some pressure on h3 pawn, they could play at least rook g3 to defend h3 pawn. And most important, control whole third rank, and eventually they will improve the position of the bishop on f1, and they will have no problem at all. And I would say even white will stay better, because black has some other issue, because they have a bishop on f7, which is stuck by surrounding his own pawns, right? So black must be very aggressive here, and I believe the plans was here. Next, so let's say after bishop c4, we have a concrete problem here. If white will play on take on c4 immediately, then after bc, I think there is some issue with c3 move, and I don't see how white will probably play. Let's say, I don't know, if he plays c3, it's too passive, because b2 pawn become permanent problem. b3 whole, it's very important, and most important, this c4 pawn stands very strong. Controlling most important squares here. So it looks like the best try for white would be in this case to play, let's say, this kind of stuff. But it's very risky also, because I don't think so it will work perfectly, since black has always counterplay by playing rook e2, attacking behind, and we have a problem with e4 pawn here. So that means after bishop c4, the bishop f1 must be traded on f1 square. So in the game, Ivanchuk went b3, and we had the first step. So what we did, we disconnect the pawns. So again, if you are playing endgame, it's most, I mean, I'm saying most important part, but one of the important stuff in endgame, especially when we're talking about pawn structure, when we are dealing with pawn structure, so with structure problem, put this way. So we always are saying the pawns must be connected. They must stay together. If you have a chance to disconnect them, always do so. So at this point, rook h2 is a very important move. For people who are curious about from what kind of opening that position could be received, I would say this is typically ideas comes from Sveshnikov, and most important, it could be also from I know Keres Panov attack when we are talking about against Swanigan 6-move g4 and black responding by playing e5. Its typical pawn structure also could come from there. So rook h3, it's important move to disconnect the pawn structure, as I said. So rook e2, well, I have to play rook e2 to defend my bishop and possibly defend my pawn on e4. But that's the first gain for black because they forced white rook to move from d file. That means they reduce pressure they release pressure from d5 square. Now, black's plan, black's, let's say, dream, it's next. So somehow try to trade d pawn on e pawn, then increase pressure on g5 on g pawn and try to force white either to play g5 or trade the g4 pawn with f6 pawn, and at the end have two passers, f7 and e5, two passers. Sounds impossible, but believe me, it's possible. So, and you will see how. So king d7. Again, since light bishop has been gone from the board, now the primary defender of white square become a black king, because that's the only piece remain who will work by light squares at this point. So king d7. So in the game, white decided to go straight g5. Now, pretty much the first stage has been complete. Again, you might say, why white play g5 here? But if they don't play g5, then it's very hard to deal with rook g8 threat. And again, another pressure on g4 pawn. It's tough to understand how you're going to defend, the g4 pawn. Are you going to play rook g1? This sounds silly also. So that's why white decided to go more active, g5, king e6. Bishop d2. So far, it's logical moves. Again, bishop e7 also sounds to me very logical because I'm staying away from this threat and I'm trying to prepare for either f5 or d5 if I have a chance. f6. Another important move to securing f6 square and being ready for d5. And finally, black managed to play d5. That's a great defensive move by Ivanchuk. He's trying to increase pressure right now on e5 square. So now let's say he has concrete threat capturing on e5 and then winning the bishop on e7, which forced black to make, let's say, inconvenient move, king c6. Why it's inconvenient? Because originally this king is supposed to stay on e6 square close to the pawns, because that's his strongest area, to stay close to the strongest area, to stay to the area where he's supposed to play. But at this point, unfortunately, he can't play king e6 because white has this blow, bishop e5, and now rook hangs, and then if I take, then simply take on e5. So unfortunately for black, they can't play king e6 here. That's why they went here king c6 temporarily. Yeah, this is a mistake from white. Again, it's really hard to judge white why they made that kind of mistake. So after the game analysis, been showing the best try for white was here to play rook f3 to put another piece on the light square. And most important, the point of playing rook f3 was to be able to play rook c3 and still try to chase black kings. Let's say rook f3, rook h7, play here. And here, basically, white having practical chance to defend the game because, I mean, they're still keeping like active rooks. In fact, I would say it's still better for black because they're still holding like two passers in the center, in the middle of the board. But that was the best practical chance for white to do. And in the game, they went rook ef2. So obviously the idea, it's very simple. They're trying to give up the rook on f6, give up the exchange, and destroy two kind of the passes, and just escape or draw. I'm not sure if I mentioned before in my previous lecture, but I will say one more time for people who is curious about this kind of endgames. In endgame, when we are dealing with rook and bishops and nothing else, if bishop getting, let's say, pawn from a side, or let's say some passer from his side, he's become pretty much the same quality piece as a rook. So make sure you will never give up, let's say in the situations, pawn on f6 and bishop on f7 for the rook by thinking, hey, it's good trade for black because I'm going to win exchange. No, it's actually wrong, because the pawn on f6 and bishop on f7 at this point, it's high quality, I mean high value than rook on f5. So this is would be called simply trade, not a sacrifice. It's a trade. So again, in endgame, rook, I mean bishop, and if bishop has a pawn aside, it's absolutely equal to rook. If bishop has even just a passer, sometimes without having, let's say, pawn, just a passer, it's also become a very strong force to play against rook. That's why Anand went here almost immediately, rook h6 to defend the pawn on f6. Now, since there is no more pressure on c6 square on the king and no more pressure, most important, on e5 square, black went here king d7. Again, hoping to take on e5 in case of bishop this, in case of king e6. But now we're ready, thanks to our rook on h6, who defending f6 pawn. And now another important move. Again, it's by principle thinking from the end, since I'm sure Anand saw idea of rook f3, rook c3 before, and he immediately understood he must play rook c8 to stop rook c3 idea and keep pressure on c2 pawn. In fact, Anand also following the principle, trying to put as more as possible eventually his piece on the light square, since white has just a dark bishop on g3. Step by step, as you see, black improving their position. Another important move, that move to defend just whole 7th rank. So you see, another important stuff about endgame. Before Anand started to push his pawn forward, he's going to completely improve his position first. He wants to make sure all his pieces will get the best positions. Now, this is what really I like this maneuver, because the idea was to relocate the rook from h file, because he figured out the rook doing nothing on h file, and he wants to put his rook on d file because he wants to create pressure even on the king sometimes, because there's some connection with a1 square could be done. So this is the way how he's playing. Again, just make sure a rook is defended. So because let's say if you play carelessly here, rook d1, we have a pin here and we have a trouble. So idea of creating mating net doesn't work because white has c3. So black must be careful, play a little bit careful. So rook c7. And now we have this idea. Now we have a threat. Retreat. Again, here why black wants to trade the pieces, because they understood the c2 rook is active, and that's the only annoying piece who is creating some kind of headache. And they try to simply get rid of that piece and then get back to idea of pushing their pawns. And now finally, time to make some tricks. e4. Pretty much forcing white to capture on e4. And now there's a strong threat to make rook a1 checkmate. If you do c3, then it's dangerous because we have rook d2. So force white to take on e5. And now c2 pawn suddenly hang. It again forces white to play king b2. And then after rook d2, it simply collapses. Again, why e4 works here perfectly, because white pieces were disconnected, and they had some concrete issue with d file and c2 pawns. So again, this is very classical example how we play endgame, how we understand the value of the good and bad bishops. It's really important to understand for you guys move bishop c4 and the following plan how that happens, because many players just know one thing. If I do have d5 fall, let's say from Sveshnikov line in Sicilian defense, or let's say Boleslavsky line in Sicilian defense, or as I mentioned, let's say Panov attack or Kir's attack. So they believe they must keep that bishop forever. But again, that's not an issue. I mean, it's important piece. Obviously, we would like to keep it, but at this point, it was endgame, and besides of thinking about the bad or good bishop, it also was connected with pawn structure. And the reason why black went bishop c4, they understood the good bishop actually, I mean, it was good, but the bad bishop on f1 was defending the all important squares, especially h3 square. And that's the reason why they figure out they need to trade their good bishop on e6 for white's bad bishop on f1, only for the reason to get some extra squares. So I hope you understand this lesson. You're not confused, but in case if you're getting confused, as I always said, you're always welcome to send me any inquiries, any emails, and I will more than glad to help you to figure out what's going on. Well, thank you for your time, and I'll see you next time. Have a good day.